Good morning, 7 East. It is Thursday, people. I hope you all enjoyed the parade on Tuesday. I know I saw several of you on the street. It was pretty cool. I did not anticipate it being that long, though, and I had to use the bathroom very badly, so I sped home after I was able to get out of all that traffic. But that was fun. Really nice turnout. Glad to see it. There was no episode yesterday because you all had the Transcontinental Railroad video to watch. But now it is Thursday, and this is your last episode of the Real for Free LEPRE Radio this week, because tomorrow you have a special broadcast that is the return of Even Stranger Things from the Unsolved Mysteries of the X-Files and the Twilight Zone, making its big return, first time since December 2019, I believe. But our agenda for today is as follows. The Daily Countdown. I want to make this a regular thing, getting us excited for the end of the year. 2, we're going to talk about railroads and a famous train robbery because I love telling stories, and this is a pretty interesting one. And finally, sports news makes a comeback. There's been some sports stuff in the news, even when there's no sports going on. And the agenda for today, that should say May 14th. It's not May 8th. I don't know why I have that there. It's May 14th. But on our calendar, Thursday, May 14th, you're watching Free LEPRE Radio episode 34. You can see talking about the impact of the Transcontinental Railroad and railroads in general in the USA. No new assignment. Google Meet at its new time, or new day, same time, 12:30. And our countdown, 31 days of school remaining. It's going to feel like a relief when we get to that 29, and then when we get to the 19, the 9, and then the 0. So I can't believe it. We actually have like a month's worth of school days left, and that's it. But on to the main topic of today, railroads and train robberies. And this is how we're going to go over that stuff today. And I start with a question, invoking Dwight from The Office. Was it risky to transport valuable items west in the early 1800s? Yes, in a word. You might not even get there. You might break down along the way. Like we saw on the Oregon Trail. This is the original game. You could just die along the way. Your wagon could break down. You might lose all of your belongings in a river crossing. I lost all of my members on my group. Dr. Phil, Guy Fieri, Gordon Ramsay, Steve Harvey, and me. A lot of stuff lost. It was in the same river, Big Blue River crossing. And everybody in the party has died, as I know I have experienced. Yes, rest in peace to us all. You could also die of disease along the way and have your stuff left behind. So Heidi has typhoid, Dr. Phil had measles, and in the second game I played, there was like 15 snake bites. It was insane. Or you might have your valuables stolen from you by trail thieves. I know several of you had oxen stolen and pounds of food stolen. So in a word, it is dangerous. So yes. But the question now is, what new invention could be used to transport valuables quickly and securely across long distances? Well, that should be self-evident. The train and the railroad, a lot safer to send your belongings along the train and the railroad rather than just riding on horseback and holding it in some knapsack. So, if you're a rich person and trying to send money or valuables to California to start a business, what are you going to put all that stuff on? The railroad. Here we have some old footage of a train. This is probably in the 1800s itself. That's how old this is. So you're going to put it on the train. It gets there faster. It's so more secure. You know where it's going. But now we have another question to ask ourselves. What kind of people also figure out that all the valuables are being transported by train now? Those same people who took your oxen. Those same people who took the pounds of food from your encampment on Oregon Trail. Thieves, robbers, criminals, degenerates, and lowlifes of all stripes. They realize that all the riches and all the valuables are now going to be on the trains. So they're going to figure out now to pull off the classic plot of every Western movie, not every Western movie, but a lot of them, the Great Train Robbery. Yes, this is the beginning of the golden age of train robberies, and Thomas the Tank Engine's not happy about it, because he's going to get stopped a lot by masked men who are going to steal all of his cargo. Sad time for Thomas. So, for this story today, we're going to talk about Jesse James, one of the most infamous outlaws of the Wild West, who pulled off one of the most daring train robberies ever. Here we have a real wanted poster. So the story begins in the summer of 1873. Jesse James sent his brother and members of his gang to Omaha, Nebraska to get the schedule for a train rumored to be carrying gold and money. The gang stole some railroad tools and ripped up track on a curve near Turkey Creek, Nebraska. If there's one thing you don't want to see as a train conductor, it's all the track ripped up or somebody tied up on the train tracks themselves, which always happens in a Western movie. The gang hid beside the point where they ripped up the rails and waited for the train to arrive. When the train hit the point where the rails were ripped up, it crashed off the rails, turned on its side, killing several people in the process. Jesse's gang put on masks and entered the train, robbing the passengers and valuables. The train was shipping out west, so if you were an investor trying to start a business, you put your gold and money on that train. Too bad, that stuff has been taken. The gang got away with the robbery, but had bounties placed on their heads. $10,000 for Jesse James and his brother. A lot more money today. I'm not exactly sure how much, but a lot. But Jesse James was eventually betrayed and killed by one of his own men, Robert Ford, and there's a Hollywood movie about it, to cash in on the reward for his killing or capture. That is one of the top 10 anime betrayals of all time. And here we have that. It's our meme of the day, even though it's not memes of the day today. All of this drama was made possible by the Transcontinental Railroad. When we start seeing railroads go across the West, that is where you start to get all these people with a bright idea to rob these trains. And then, of course, we have all the plots of these Western movies. Now, here's how travel times actually compared to get out west. So by boat, it was 18,000 miles. Back then, you had to go all the way around South America. So let's say you're in New York and you want to get to San Francisco. You got to go south all the way down around South America, all the way up, traveling about 100 miles a day. Take you about 6 months, 180 days. If you're traveling by wagon, it's much less, but you don't go as fast as a boat. So it's 2,000 miles. If you take the Erie Canal and you start out in Missouri and you cross and you get to Oregon or the West Coast, 2,000 miles, 10 miles a day pretty much. Also takes you about 6 months, give or take. It's 200 days. But by the railroad, you're going 3,000 miles. So you're going coast to coast, 500 miles a day. Take you 6 days. If you do the math on that, that's if the train is going 24 hours a day. That means the train is only going about 20 miles an hour. They would stop, though, refuel and things like that at places along the way. But the trains are not as fast as you would think. So these aren't bullet trains. They're going slow enough for people to ride up alongside on horses and jump and rob as well. So those are the travel times, and you can see how the railroad would be appealing. Imagine instead of having to pack and save all this money to go to Oregon by wagon, you could just save up for a train ticket and then have all your belongings with you. You don't got to feed yourself. You don't have to have all these animals to take care of, and you'll be there in about a week. And here we have kind of a picture that shows what's been going on in the world at this point in westward expansion. It's technology versus the old way of doing things, and this train is going to blast past this horse. So the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad, they actually have a picture of it, and this is Promontory Point, where the tracks finally met. And if you had watched the video already, you'll know that the final nail or the final spike they put in the railroad was actually a ceremonial golden spike, which they eventually took out so that no one could go there and rip it up and then sell it. The golden spike, it's the final piece of the TCR. Now it's in a museum. It is not that heavy. It's 9.5 ounces, but if you know the price of gold, which today it's about $1,700 an ounce, that means this spike today, this one like nail, is worth, in terms of the gold itself, it's worth over $16,000, but it's probably worth even more as a historical item. And here's a graph just showing the impact of railroad construction over time. So you see how railroads, 1860 was pretty high because that's when the Transcontinental Railroad actually started, or around that time. Railroads existed before this, but just not a lot. And you see how it's just growing and growing and growing and growing up until 1871, and it decreases a little and it goes up again. This is really the golden age of railroad building. We're going to have some of the richest people in American history are going to make their fortunes off of the railroad. People like Vanderbilt, responsible for Grand Central Station, Stanford University. Those guys were railroad people. And railroad construction is going to play a big role in our next unit, the Civil War. And I'm going to point that out with the next map of impacts of the railroad. So you see this map, and the lines here are the railroads and that existed in 1860 to 1869 in the United States. Now, it's no surprise that there's fewer railroads the further west you go because there's fewer people. Take a look at the one down south. You see how one of them goes right near the border with Mexico. Remember the Gadsden Purchase? They did that so they could get this railroad to go through this southern part of the U.S. right here. So, flashback to earlier lessons. The interesting thing, though, is that most of the railroads are contained in the northern or northeastern part of the country. That is going to play a big role in the Civil War. If you're a soldier fighting in the Civil War, one way to make sure that you're in fighting shape is to make sure that you're not marching too much. And one way to make sure you don't march too much is by having a train take you to the battlefield and take your supplies with you and get there on time. Well, the North is going to have that advantage, and the South, as you can see, is not. The railroads are few and far between, much less than the North. This kind of gives you an idea of where the population was in America at this time. It was in the North, specifically the Northeast, and it gets more dispersed the further west you go, and the population is lower in the South as well. Now for our final segment of the day, sports news. Sports news making a comeback. Our first item on our sports news agenda, the Olympics. I was excited to watch them this summer, but now they've been postponed for a year, but I'm glad to see the Olympic athletes are not taking a break. Apparently this fencer is now, instead of being an Olympic athlete at the Summer Olympics, he has to wait, and now he's delivering for Uber Eats. I would imagine that it would be very sad for the person who tries to rob this Uber Eats car, like Jesse James who robbed the railroad, because this person is trained in swordsmanship and all that. So good luck to him. Story number 2. The Last Dance is a rating smash for ESPN. It's also creating an onslaught of Michael Jordan memes. So The Last Dance, I've been avoiding watching this because I don't like the Bulls, being a Knicks and Pistons fan. But I broke down and watched the first 4 episodes, and it's actually really good, but I'm actually enjoying the fact that you can make a lot of memes out of it. So this was Michael Jordan's reaction to Isaiah Thomas's explanation for walking off the court at the end of the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals. I see a lot of potential for this one. This is going to be a classic. Not as classic as the Crying Jordan meme, but this will be pretty good too. Last but not least, number 3, sports news of the day. Cardboard fans cheer on Korean baseball team. So no fans in the stands. They resume play. I like this idea. It gives the illusion of there being a crowd. I'd like to see this at American sports games. Cardboard cutouts. Maybe you could put like cameras in them or screens, like an iPad where the face is, and people can actually have their face there. We'll see what happens. Baseball is supposed to start now on July 4th. Maybe we'll have some cardboard fans in the stands. It should be interesting either way. That is the final sports news update of the day. This is going to be me signing off. I'll see you later at the Google Meet if you will show up. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode of Even Stranger Things making its big comeback. Until then, this is Mr. LEPRE signing off.